Maybe you're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include a raw meal, the unreal, and a bad deal.
Wrong!
It's the wrong podcast, but we'll make it right. Spinning the world in a whole new light. Winning wild and a little askew. And the one who's right, it might be you. It might be you.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1! Sasquatch! I have to bring to your attention something that a listener brought to my attention. He's on church staff, he's a pastor. He got an email encouraging him to sign a petition and to get the rest of his church to sign a petition against California Bill 666. Now, if you're a Christian, even if you're not a Christian, those numbers 666 should register something with you. What the heck is going on in California? There's an Assembly Bill number 666. Let me ask Randy to read to you the text of this petition against Assembly Bill 666.
This petition is driven by concerns surrounding California Assembly Bill 666 and its troubling implications. The number 666 holds significant meaning for many Christians worldwide, not just as numerology, but as a symbol deeply rooted in biblical prophecy from the book of Revelation, where it is referred to as the number of the beast. This number is associated with evil, oppressive power, and the Antichrist, offering a strong warning against authoritarianism and the erosion of religious freedoms. Beyond its religious connotations, the bill also appears to impose excessive restrictions on individual rights and liberties, potentially infringing upon our ability to freely practice religion. In a country that values freedom, including the right to religious expression, protected by the First Amendment, this bill poses a threat not only to Christians, but to all who cherish their right to practice their faith without interference. Even more concerning is how the bill deceptively uses the notion of Bigfoot to mask its true intentions. The inclusion of Bigfoot in this bill appears to be a diversion tactic, attempting to downplay the seriousness of its content. By focusing on a mythical creature, the bill seeks to divert attention from its more sinister agenda, restricting individual freedoms and religious expression. This manipulation is an attempt to deceive the public and push forward a law that undermines the very principles our nation was founded on. The combination of this symbolic implications, the potential to restrict freedoms, and the deceptive use of Bigfoot to distract from the bill's true purpose make this an alarming proposal for the protection of religious liberty. It's time for us to unite in defense of our rights and resist attempts to undermine the freedoms we hold dear. This is not just about opposing a piece of legislation, it's about defending the core values that shape our society. Sign this petition to oppose California Assembly Bill 666, safeguard religious freedom, and prevent the normalization of this evil number in our legal system.
So I went and I looked up, okay, is this real at all? Is there even an Assembly Bill 666? Could it possibly be doing the things that it claims, that this petition claims it's doing? And I looked it up, and it's real. Assembly Bill 666 is real. Here are the words of Assembly Bill 666. Existing laws establish the state flag and the state emblems, including, among other things, the golden poppy as the official state flower, and the California redwood as the official state tree. This bill would state the intent of the legislature to enact legislation that would designate Bigfoot as the official state cryptid. That's it. That's all it says. That the legislation would establish Bigfoot as the official state cryptid. Now, what is a cryptid, you might ask? Is a cryptid a way of restricting religious liberty in some way that I'm unaware? A cryptid is a creature that people believe to exist without proof. And in many ways, that's exactly what this petition is. Now, other examples of cryptids would be the Loch Ness Monster, the chupacabra, and Tim's sense of humor. And the reason I say that this petition is a cryptid is because it sees in this bill something that does not exist. It sees in it a restriction of religious liberty, even though there's no evidence of that at all. And this is a dumb bill. Why is this bill? Does it exist? Why is it Assembly number 666? It's weird. It's unnecessary. We don't need this. And why the heck would you give it the number 666? Well, it was proposed by an assemblyman, a California assemblyman, and he's from Santa Rosa, California. It's a city about 45 minutes an hour north of San Francisco. And he says, hey, we have this thing called a spot bill. And a spot bill is something that you put in place while you're working out the details of something. And sometimes there's a lot of, what's the word? There's a lot of symbolism in politics. There's a lot of just raising perceptions and things like that. And sometimes spot bills are used to just create a sense of, to communicate something. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time finding that word. So he gives this example. There's some assemblyman or a representative who makes it illegal to be poor in California. And he does that to highlight the problems of poverty in California. And this bill doesn't get anywhere. It's just something he introduces and pulls away. So this guy from Santa Rosa, he introduces a spot bill saying, hey, let's make Bigfoot our official state cryptid. And then when people go looking for it, we'll pull it away. And it'll be just like Bigfoot. It'll disappear, just like Bigfoot always does when you go looking for him. So it's kind of like this internal joke for himself. And it's gotten big publicity. It's actually worked. And the reason he did it is because Santa Rosa is the place in California where Bigfoot was supposedly first spotted. So he wants to bring tourism. He wants to bring Bigfoot, Sasquatch tourism to Santa Rosa, California. And so he said, we thought it'd be really funny to introduce a spot bill that when we amended it, it would disappear and become elusive as Bigfoot is. So don't sign the petition. And also, this petition, before I move on, I'm so frustrated about crap like this that sees something that's not there and then tries to make an issue and gets Christians all riled up about it, or gets anybody all riled up about it. There's nothing here about limiting free speech or religious liberty. You do yourself a disservice. You know that, right? When you say that something's there that's not there. We've all heard the story of the boy who cried wolf, right? Apparently not, because this dude's the boy who cried Bigfoot. Issue number 2. I like it raw. You ever wondered, why do we cook our food? How come no other animals cook their food? Why do we cook our food? We're animals, like all the other animals. They just eat meat, and they do it without cooking. And here's the deal. We could eat raw meat. We can. Our stomachs, our systems are designed to eat raw meat. The reason that we cook our food is because humans don't like diarrhea. Another reason humans cook their food is because we don't like throwing up. It's uncomfortable for us. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's uncomfortable when you have either of those things happening, right? And over time, humans discovered, hey, if we cook this meat, we don't throw up quite as often as we used to. And all the other animals, they would love to cook their meat too, because they're all puking their guts out all the time. We have figured out that this is a much better way to eat our food. If we cook it a little bit, we feel better about the whole thing. Well, there's been a resurgence, and it's not surprising at all. You know about this with vaccine hesitancy and people moving into cities. There's always this feeling like, oh, we need to get back to nature. We need to get back to the way things were. And so there are people who advocate that we should eat all of our meat raw and that we should drink raw milk. That's milk that hasn't been pasteurized. And pasteurization is a method where they heat up the milk and kill everything bad in it and then get it cool again. And then we should drink raw water. What is raw water, you might ask? Raw water is water that hasn't been filtered in any way, hasn't been cleaned. And as you might remember, I grew up in the Philippines, and as an American, my stomach and the stomach of all of those who grew up outside of the Philippines, we could not drink the water there. We had to boil our water. We had to get it clean somehow because there were things in it that our systems could not handle and were sure to make us sick. And so this idea of drinking raw water is like, hey, get rid of your city's water sanitation department and just drink the water straight from the swamp. That will be fine. You'll actually get stronger because of it. And getting stronger because of it is the point. There's this idea of anti-fragility, and it's the idea that your bones get stronger the more resistance they have in them. So when we go to outer space, our bones get brittle because we're not exercising enough. And the idea is that our immune systems are anti-fragile, just like our bones. And the best way to help them is strength through adversity. And the problem with this idea is that it does work. People's immune systems do get stronger. You will get stronger. The problem is that a lot of people are going to die in the process. There's a lot of people whose systems will not get stronger. Their systems will never get strong enough to handle all of your raw milk and your raw meat and your raw water. They're going to die. You're going to have a lot less people around. So we've found this way that maybe, we're cheating a little bit, but it turns out cheating helps the vast majority of people not to get sick. And that's why it's a good idea. And one other thing I want to add on to this is Pete Hegseth. You might have heard his name. He is the new Secretary of Defense for Donald Trump. He used to be a Fox News columnist. He was a weekend Fox News personality. And you can look this up. I'm not making this up. I'm not saying this to smear the man. He said, I'm going to say everything in public that I would say in private. And 5 years ago, he said, I don't wash my hands. And I haven't washed my hands in over 10 years. I don't think germs are real because you can't see them. And I'm just developing my own immune system. I'm making myself stronger because of it. So if you ever encounter Pete Hegseth, this is where I strongly recommend the Japanese bow or the fist bump instead of a handshake. Hey, it's time. What are the rules?
Oh, what are the rules? What are the rules? Don't touch my fries or my garden tools. Oh, what are the rules? Yeah, I got my quirks. Follow them closely and I promise it works.
Have you seen this thing? You go out to eat and there's another family there and they've set up tablets in front of their children so their children can watch a screen, their own individual screens, while eating their chicken nuggets or their macaroni and cheese. And I can't help it. I get judgy when I see this. You want to see Judgy Tim come right on out. It's when I see little kids sitting in front of screens in public restaurants. What are you doing? Engage with your kids. This is an opportunity to teach your kids how to behave in public. I know you need a break. I know you would like some quiet time. You're not helping your kid for the rest of his life. In fact, you're making things worse by putting a screen in front of him, by putting this digital babysitter in front of him. And I get it. I know. I don't know what's going on with you. I don't know what the rest of your day has been like. That's okay. I'm still judgy. I'm going to judge you for this. Talk to your kids. That's the rule. Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@therewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, therewrongpodcast.com, and help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. Oh, I was wrong.
Responding to my last episode entitled Pardon My Musk, listener Sam says, couldn't agree more regarding Jingleheimer Junction. That's the one sketch I physically laugh the hardest at every time without fail. Absolutely agree, Sam. Listener Trevor writes in, says, how is this image a real thing published by the White House? And he sends me this image of Donald Trump wearing a crown on the cover of Time magazine. And it's a real thing. I didn't make it up. It's there, but what Trevor didn't know, and what I didn't know, is that just a few days after publishing that image, Donald Trump sent out this AI-generated video of what the Trump Hotel will be like in Gaza. And included in this celebration of prosperity in Gaza is a giant golden statue of Donald Trump. And you can go to a local shop and buy a replica golden statue of Donald Trump and take it home with you. And there is just not enough biblical literacy going on. Because, wow, you do not want to be putting a statue of yourself up anywhere, particularly a golden statue. And what comes to mind is there's a story from 1 Samuel in the Bible where the Philistines, they're the enemies of the Hebrews, and they live in present-day Gaza. Now, the people in present-day Gaza, they are not related to the Philistines in any way. They're a different ethnicity entirely. But the Philistines lived in that same place, and they had this god named Dagon. And the Philistines stole the Ark of the Covenant, and they put it at the feet of Dagon, and Dagon fell over. So they set him back up, and then Dagon fell over, and his head fell off, and his hands broke. And all the people got infected with hemorrhoids. And so they sent the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel because they couldn't stand the hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids is not going to be in every translation of the Bible, by the way, but I prefer to use that translation in the telling of this story. Trevor goes on to say, also, the new intro music is growing on me. I guess I'm more open to change than I thought. Way to go, Trevor. I knew you weren't as old as I thought you were. Listener Drew, he writes in and says, loved your SNL segment, but your paper straw segment, I think, might be my favorite thing ever, except for your Mormon segments. Thanks, Drew. Appreciate that. Yeah, I had strong opinions about paper straws. You know, I'm glad people feel it with me. Issue number 3, Playing for Keeves. A number of years ago, Wendy and I went on, the lovely Wendy and I, not to be confused with just any old Wendy, the lovely Wendy, and we went on vacation to Prague. It was a great vacation, one of my favorite vacations I've ever experienced in my life. Prague is a wonderful city. It's like stepping into very old Europe. And the reason, the thing that caught my attention about Prague was, one, somebody said it's like going to Paris but on the cheap. And that's true. You can get authentic French food in the Czech Republic. I guess it's not French then, but French style food. And it's much cheaper than it would be in Paris. And what somebody said about Prague was, this is the only capital in Europe that was untouched by World War II. So nothing's been rebuilt. It's exactly the way it was before World War II. And that caught my attention. I want to see this. And it is. This has to be the inspiration for Fantasyland and all those other fairy tales that are in your mind. Prague is it. And the reason Prague was untouched by World War II is actually a very sad story. Hitler, that's right, first mention of Hitler in the podcast. Don't worry, you'll hear more of him soon. Hitler, he takes power in Germany. He says, hey, we need breathing room. And he starts telling the European leaders, hey, we're going to take this property. And they don't want war again. They're still getting over World War I, which they didn't think of as World War I yet. And they say, fine, you can have that property. Maybe we took too much from you in the war. Go ahead and take that one. He says, great, now I'm going to take Austria. And they say, oh, okay, fine. And I'm going to take Hungary. all right, fine. And he goes, and I want Czechoslovakia. And they say, oh, hold on. No, like we've already said yes to all these other things. Don't take Czechoslovakia. So Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of England, he sits down, not of England, of the United Kingdom, the whole thing. He sits down with Hitler in Munich. They work out this peace deal to avoid war. And without anybody from Czechoslovakia present, Neville Chamberlain and Hitler divide up the country. And they say, okay, Hitler, go ahead and take these parts of Czechoslovakia, but leave these other parts. Leave those alone. He says, fine. Well, the parts of Czechoslovakia they took were all the mountains, all the defensive positions around the borders. Those were just ceded to Hitler without permission of the Czech people at all, the Czechoslovakian people at all. They had no say in it. Somebody else decided how their country could be divided up, and that included the mountains. So Hitler moves in on the mountains. The rest of the country it's undefensible at this point. And Hitler says to the government of Czechoslovakia, hey, now that I've got all my guns pointed down at you from your mountains, I'm just going to roll in and take the rest of it. And they see that they don't have a choice in the matter. They cannot defend what they have. And they say, okay. So Hitler takes the entire country without firing a shot. And the hardest parts of the country to get were gifted to him by Neville Chamberlain. And Winston Churchill is furious at Chamberlain because he keeps conceding all this territory to the Germans. He just keeps conceding. Everything he wants, he gives it to him because he wants to avoid war. We have to avoid war. That's Chamberlain's MO. And Churchill says of him, you had a choice between dishonor or war. You chose dishonor, and instead you'll get both, dishonor and war. Now, I tell you that story to tell you another story. Just imagine that a friend of yours is getting raped. Man, this story turned dark right away. Sorry about that. But just imagine you somehow encounter your friend getting gang raped. And you don't like this one bit. You know it's wrong. So you say to your friend, hey, I'm willing to help you get out of this situation. I'm willing to help you not get raped anymore. But I need you to pay me $1,000 a month for the next 20 years. Because, this is it's gonna be troublesome. There might be some issues later on in courts or whatever. This guy might come back to get me. I'll stop it as soon as you promise to pay me $1,000 a month for the next 20 years. Because we're friends. I bring up this situation because Donald Trump recently went to Saudi Arabia to meet with the Russians to negotiate about Ukraine. And do you know who was not present in Saudi Arabia at this negotiation about Ukraine? Ukraine was not present. Then, shortly afterwards, Donald Trump says, hey, Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he's actually a dictator. He's a dictator. They have not had elections. They're in martial law right now. They can't have elections. And, this dictator in Ukraine, he should have never started this war with Russia. He should have never started it. And, we have given him $350 billion, which is not true. We have not given him $350 billion. That's almost double what we've actually given him. And then the United Nations, on the third anniversary of this moment where Ukraine apparently invaded Russia in their own country, the United Nations has a resolution. And let me just say, the UN is a joke. Who cares what happens with UN resolutions? They don't mean anything. I wouldn't mind if the United States left the UN. I don't know that it would actually have an impact on anything. I say that to tell you about this UN resolution. The UN has this resolution to condemn Russia for invading Ukraine and for committing war crimes while invading Ukraine. And the United States doesn't just sit out this resolution, it votes against it. Says, no, this is wrong. It's wrong to say that Russia invaded, that Russia was wrong to invade Ukraine, and it was wrong to accuse them of war crimes. We're voting no against this. And we're encouraging Israel and anybody else we can to vote against this. Now, Israel has a vested interest in keeping the United States happy. Israel also has a vested interest in recognizing that it's not cool to invade smaller democratic nations. So Israel, the United States, Russia, North Korea, Belarus, and Venezuela all vote against this resolution. Now that's quite the cadre of countries there that we're aligning with. China doesn't even vote no on this thing. They sit it out. And the best I can tell is Donald Trump wants the war to end. He's friendly with Vladimir Putin of Russia, and he knows that he can't get anything out of Putin to end this war. So he's putting all of the pressure on Ukraine. Hey, by the way, have you noticed that we've all stopped saying the Ukraine? Way to go, everybody. We're all calling it Ukraine now. Good job. Something I mentioned 3 years ago. So Donald Trump is putting all the pressure on Ukraine to end the war. And this is just gross as far as I can tell. All the things he's saying are false. They don't align with reality. And speaking of dictators, Putin is the dictator. He's the real dictator here. And Donald Trump goes to Ukraine and says, hey, I'll stop this war, but you've got to give me mineral rights in Ukraine. And the mineral rights he's asking for are disturbing. It's extortion. There's this thing in the mob where somebody smashes up your store, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, that was pretty terrible that somebody smashed up your store and stole stuff. We could provide protection for you so that it never happens again. And who knows if it's the same people who smashed up your store and are providing protection for you. It doesn't matter. It's gross either way. It's extortion. And the terms of this deal, they're generations long, and it's basically like the United States gets the profit of all the minerals that are sold out of Ukraine for the next several generations. And we're not going to provide any security guarantees to Ukraine in exchange for these mineral rights. We need to get paid back for what we've done. We're going to go ahead and get paid back, but we're not going to do anything if Russia decides to take more of your territory. We can't promise that that won't happen. But, we've got economic interests now, so, Donald Trump says he believes Putin. He believes him to be trustworthy and to stop invading. And since this time, Russia has come out and said that they are glad to see the United States line up with all of their foreign policy goals. This is mind-boggling. This should be mind-boggling to you. You should be disturbed that Russia just said, we're so glad to see the United States agree with us on how the world should be handled. Now, let me just explain something about how Russia views the world. They believe in spheres of influence. And the problem that Russia is experiencing is that their sphere of influence is shrinking, and they don't like it. And Vladimir Putin wants to expand his sphere of influence. And that doesn't necessarily mean expanding the borders of Russia. He just wants all the countries around him to be friendly with Russia and to do what he wants them to do. So that involves setting up puppet governments and being corrupt with their government officials so that they're kicking money back to him or to Russia. And this didn't all start, but one of the things that triggered this invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago, was that the Ukrainian people had an election and they voted out Putin's puppet. Now, Belarus, they have a puppet government for Putin. Ukraine used to as well. The Ukrainian people got fed up with it. They voted it out. They put in Zelensky. One of his chief goals is to say, no, Russia is not our friend and we need better friends. And so he is trying to get Ukraine more invested in Europe and have Europe more invested in Ukraine. And this means that Russia's sphere of influence is shrinking, and Putin doesn't like it. He feels threatened by it. And the thing is, Ukraine is an independent nation. They were promised to be able to have sovereignty and independence and have secure borders. And that means that they get to side and they get to join whatever clubs they want. They get to buddy up to anybody they want, even if it's not Russia. And some of the things that Donald Trump has been doing since he came into office are going to make sense to you when I mention sphere of influence, because that is Putin's worldview. He thinks, hey, anybody close to me, they can exist, but I'm going to have influence over them. And Donald Trump, he's come in, and one of the first things he said is, hey, we need to take Greenland, which is a good idea. If Greenland is for sale, the United States should absolutely buy it. He's also said, hey, Canada really should be our 51st state. And you know what? The Gulf of Mexico, that's not the Gulf of Mexico, that's the Gulf of America. And Panama, why are we not running the Panama Canal anymore? That should be our canal. Why? That was the worst thing we ever did, was to give up the Panama Canal. All those people died. They owe it to us to let us keep control of the Panama Canal. Now, he has some good points about the Chinese companies that are running the Panama Canal. He has some valid points about it. But this is all influence, you can tell, by Putin's idea of sphere of influence. The things around you should be controlled by the biggest, baddest country in the area. And let me just real quick on Canada becoming our 51st state. Maybe I could see it in 100 years. Who knows what happens with world politics and the economies and demographic decline. Canada might want to say, hey, you know what? We should be part of the United States. They were actually invited to be part of the United States when we founded our country. There were 13 colonies that became independent United States, and there were 13 colonies that remained British sovereigns in Canada. And you can read the records where we were inviting them to join us. They decided not to. I could totally see a reason for them to become part of the United States in the future, but not by teasing and taunting them. And however else Trump is doing this, it's kind of gross. So let me give you a brief timeline for, let's say, the last 30 years. This goes back much, much further than the last 30 years, but let's start with 30 years ago.
December 1994. Ukraine agrees to give up its nuclear arsenal in return for security guarantees from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, and Russia. February 2014. Russia invades and subsequently annexes Crimea, that's part of Ukraine, and President Obama does next to nothing. This is a classic example of war through weakness. July 2019. The Trump administration withholds $250 million in military aid to Ukraine to apply pressure to investigate alleged corruption by Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. As you know, somebody, there was a whistleblower that said, hey, this isn't cool. That money was allocated. Trump can't withhold that in exchange for a political favor. And by the way, Hunter Biden was working for a Russian oligarch at the time who has since been kicked out of Ukraine. Donald Trump goes on to be impeached over this, but he is not removed from office. And then in February 2022, Russia invades a weakened Ukraine. The world expects Zelensky to flee and Kiev to fall within a matter of days. Ukrainians fight bravely for 3+ years, inflict hundreds of thousands of casualties on the Russian army, and weaken Putin politically. Since then, Russia has committed numerous war crimes, including intentionally targeting hospitals, encouraging rape as a weapon against civilians, and kidnapping over 20,000 Ukrainian children and placing them in re-education camps in Russia.
So why should Americans care? This is awful, this is bad, but we can't care about everything happening in the world. This is on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. There's a big ocean that divides us. We're safe from this. Yes, Russia's bad. Putin's awful. This is terrible. Sorry, I can't solve every problem in the world. You might be saying to yourself. Well, I'm going to play a speech by Secretary of State Marco Rubio to explain why this is something you should care about.
When the Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, Ukraine was left with the world's third largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons and strategic nuclear weapons on the planet. But they signed this agreement with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia that basically said, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we, these three countries that signed to this, will provide for your defense and assure you of your defense. And so Ukraine did that. They gave up these weapons. Well, now, this was signed in 1994, 20 years later, one of the three countries that signed that agreement hasn't just not provided for their defense, they actually invaded them. And I want to make a point on this for a second. Think about if you're one of these other countries around the world right now that feels threatened by your neighbors. And the United States and the rest of the world are going to you and saying, listen, don't develop nuclear weapons. Don't develop nuclear weapons, South Korea. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Japan. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia. We will protect you. We will watch out for you. What kind of lesson do you think this instance sends to them? I think the message this is sending to many nations around the world is perhaps we can no longer count on the security promises made by the free world. Perhaps we need to start looking out for ourselves. And that's why the Ukrainian situation is so much more important than simply what's happening in Europe. This has implications around the world.
Now, as you might have guessed, that is not a recent speech of Marco Rubio's. That is before he joined the Trump administration. But it is true. All of that is true. We made a promise. And the downside of breaking that promise is nuclear proliferation. I know some of you are really excited to see me trip over the word proliferation. Proliferation. I was setting myself up there by going back to it. We don't want nuclear weapons all over the world. The fewer countries that hold them, the better things are. You want the people to hold these weapons to be extremely rational and to have extremely well-guarded reasons for using them. And the more countries that have them, the more likely they are to get in the hands of somebody who's a little bit nuts and doesn't think long term and doesn't realize that it is unthinkable to use them from this moment forward. And if you're South Korea or you're South Africa or you're Brazil, you're looking at whatever threats are around you and you say, you know what? The United States said that they would take care of us, but I'm not so sure they will, because that's what they said to Ukraine. And they didn't step up for them. And Ukraine could have avoided all of this by just keeping their own nukes. And Russia would have backed off if Ukraine had their nukes and would have been willing to use them against Russia when their borders were crossed. The other reason this matters to Americans is because you want stable borders and you want stable trade. We live in a global economy. There's this big rush to reinstitute isolationism in the United States, and we cannot be isolationist. We live in the world. We have the communications and we have the transportation now where you can get anywhere in the world. And you can't go it alone anymore. All of these problems that happen in other parts of the world, they eventually trickle to you. 3 years ago, when Putin invaded Ukraine, the price of gas went up because the world market for oil became unstable because these two countries were at war. Nobody knew what was going to happen with them. You couldn't rely on getting a barrel of oil from Russia or Ukraine anymore. And that meant that oil from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Alaska all became a little bit more expensive. That stuff matters to you. It matters to your pocketbook. You want stable borders because you want stable trade. They both eventually make things cost less for you over the long haul. And then Ukraine is a democratic nation. And when countries have the same shared values as us, they're more likely to share resources with us. We want the people who think like us to do well. If we don't care about them, then we're going to have fewer and fewer friends who think and act the way we do. And, other countries, when they're facing a problem, they might say, China really sucks. They really do. We don't like them. They're kind of mean. But you know what? The thing we know about China is that they uphold their end of the deal. They can be counted on to do the things that they said they were going to do. And we can't really count on the United States to bail us out. Because even beyond Donald Trump, we don't know who they're going to elect next. We just don't know how they're going to behave. They can't be trusted to have consistent ethic, regardless of who's voted in. Now, this has cost us money. We've paid about $189 billion. And that sounds like a lot. It is a lot of money. What you need to know is that 80% of it, so it's $189 billion over the last 3 years. That is 5% of our total military budget. 80% of it has been munitions, ammunition and other things, other weapons that were expiring. And yes, these things expire and we have to get rid of them. You can't count on that bullet or that grenade to go off for the next 40 years. So eventually you throw it away. And instead of throwing it away, we've been giving it to Ukraine and having them use it. And then we buy new stuff for ourselves like we were planning to do anyways. The money goes right back into all of the arms manufacturers in the United States for stuff we were going to throw away. And we've seen the Ukrainians, this tiny nation, defend themselves with our ammo and take out half of Russia's military with no American deaths. We are getting our bang for the buck on this. This is amazing. One of the major threats in the world is being seriously downgraded just by taking our stuff that we were going to throw away anyways and using it on them. And now they're using that same stuff on North Koreans who are invading their country on behalf of Russia. This is a win-win for us. It's cheap to do this. We cannot get a better deal. So just to put, I know that 189 billion is a big number and you can't get your head around it. I'm going to try to explain what that number actually means. Our annual budget is $6.8 trillion. It's $6.8 trillion a year. We have been sending $61 billion to Ukraine. That is less than 1% of our annual budget. I am the first to say that we have budget issues. When anybody has budget issues, you still have to pay for the house insurance. You still have to pay for the car insurance. And giving money to Ukraine is like paying an insurance bill. It means that a threat is getting downgraded on our behalf in somebody else's territory. This is the cheapest way to take care of this issue, the cheapest way to confront Vladimir Putin and to keep him from continuing to take other places in Europe that he might have interest in. I want you to pull out Google Maps right now. I'll wait 1 second. Just kidding. I won't wait. That's boring podcasting. Go ahead and pause it. Open up Google Maps and type in Estonia. Go find Estonia. Now, next to Estonia is Latvia and Lithuania, and there's also Poland right there. Now, there's a little triangle section just north of Poland, just east of Estonia, and that is Russia. There is a little bit of Russia that is on the other side of Estonia and Latvia. Do you think that Vladimir Putin would not like to reunite that section of his country with the mainland? Of course he would. He has said he would. He hates that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are part of NATO. He would like to remove them. If we are afraid of him escalating and going to war, he's just going to keep finding new places to take and say, hey, you better give this to us or there'll be war. Eventually, he's going to go to Alaska and say, hey, I think I'd like Alaska now. And if we continue to say, well, we have to give it to him because, if we don't, there's going to be war, he's going to continue to take it. This is the lesson that we learned from Neville Chamberlain. And this situation is not exactly the same as it was in the 1930s. History doesn't repeat, but it likes to rhyme. And it's our job when studying history to learn those lessons so that we don't repeat them. And when it comes to expansionist dictators, there's a very clear lesson. Treating them with kid gloves and being nice and giving them what they wanted never satisfies them. So this brings up the debacle of the last week. In fact, it's the debacle of the Trump administration so far this time around. There's this Oval Office meeting between Zelensky, Trump, and J.D. Vance. Zelensky flies into Washington. He's going to sign this mineral rights deal with the United States. They have it agreed upon. It's sitting in another room waiting for them to sign. I don't know what the terms of it are, but as far as I can tell, it means no security guarantees for Ukraine. A security guarantee would include, hey, let's put some troops there so that if Russia invades, the French soldiers or British soldiers get killed, or German soldiers get killed, or Polish soldiers get killed. And if that happens, well, that's an escalation. That's not cool. There's going to be consequences. Just like we have U.S. soldiers sitting in South Korea on the border with North Korea to make sure that North Korea doesn't invade. You have to get through a few dozen Americans first, which would be easy for you, but if you do it, there's going to be massive, massive repercussions. And from everything we can tell, there are no security guarantees for Ukraine in this minerals deal. So Zelensky, he knows that he signed 25 ceasefires with Russia. All 25 have been violated. Putin's word is no good to him. He wants security guarantees. He wants somebody to stand in the way to guard the border. Give us a few dozen men who, if they get killed, it's going to be a big, big problem for Vladimir Putin. And so they're having this press conference with all the press there, the three leaders, and these things usually last about 10 minutes long. They're just photo opportunities. And this one is going on for a very long time. It's gone over 40 minutes at this point, which is very, very weird. And Trump has already embarrassed Zelensky. He's already called him a dictator. He already says he owes us, that he started the war. So to have Zelensky show up and to sit here in this meeting, it feels a little bit like a setup, but it's going well for the first 40 minutes. And then J.D. Vance says something, and Zelensky decides he's had enough, and he decides to ask Vance a question. Do you think Vladimir Putin can be trusted? And this is the point where the press conference goes off the rails. And it is like Trump and Vance tag teaming on Zelensky the whole time. And they're speaking over him. One will ask him Zelensky a question, and as he starts to answer, the other one will speak over him and ask a different question. And they're double teaming him. It's not a fair fight because he's not in his own country. He's in the Oval Office. He's doing the best he can. And one thing, I'm going to play the clip for you. There's something I want to point out to you. Trump seems to have been doing well up until this point. And then Vance jumps in, and this stuff seems a little bit planned on J.D. Vance's part. And he says three things that he knows will both bait Zelensky and goad Donald Trump. They're things that Donald Trump cannot stand to hear other people say about him. He says that Zelensky is disrespecting Trump, and he's disrespecting America. Trump cannot stand to be disrespected. He says that Zelensky is ungrateful. He's full of ingratitude. And this is not at all true. You can go find clips of all the times Zelensky has thanked the United States. And then he says Zelensky was aiding Joe Biden in the last election, and this is not okay. And at the start of it, you can kind of tell Donald Trump is interested in what Vance is saying, and he's kind of curious about what Zelensky will say. But as Vance ups the ante on these attacks, Trump has to step in and defend his own honor. And that's why he double teams. I don't think that it was a setup on Donald Trump's part, but I do think it might have been a setup on J.D. Vance's part. So I'm going to play this clip for you. I want to ask you one more question. Notice the three things I said: disrespect, ingratitude, and aiding and abetting Joe Biden. And then I see some people saying Zelensky's making an emotional argument to get people on his side. Listen closely. Is Zelensky making an emotional argument? Here's the clip.
He broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count one.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
I'm not
cards.
playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of
war.
millions of people. You're
You
gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we
coming
are
out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said thank
stupid
you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
Yes. What about
if you didn't have our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I
Again,
tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times
that
thank
there,
you
accept
to
that,
American people.
accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I
over
understand,
there.
sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running
I
low
know.
on soldiers. Listen,
Don't please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then
President.
then you tell us I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
Now, I think that clip, that moment in the White House, is an inflection point in United States history. And it's not the moment that something happened, but it's the moment we'll all look back on and say, that was the moment we knew something was different. This thing that's been happening was happening. It's happening anyways, regardless of that press conference. The press conference didn't make it true. It just made it obvious. And the thing that is now obvious to the rest of the world is that the United States cannot be trusted to fulfill its promises. And we will try to extract something out of you if you need us. The rest of the world is now going to consider that it might be better to choose other friends than the United States. Because the United States will seek to embarrass you if you do not give them what they want. And this is a travesty as far as I'm concerned. This is one of the things I was most concerned about with Trump coming into office. We didn't know how he was going to respond to Ukraine and Zelensky. And this is worse than I imagined at this point. And I think it could actually get worse. I hope it doesn't. But this is awful for the United States. This is awful for our reputation. We had it easy in the world. We really did. People thought we were the good guys and that we could help and that we had a lot of money and they were willing to work with us. And now it may not be worth it. And there might be other friends to consider for them. They might decide that they'd rather partner with China or Russia or Iran for a number of other reasons. Because when other countries get in trouble and they need help, and those other countries might say, hey, you know what? Can you really trust the United States right now? Look what they did to Ukraine. Now, this is not over for Ukraine. Everybody's like, oh, Zelensky's done, Ukraine's done, Russia's going to roll over them. Europe can handle this on their own. The European economy, all totaled together, is 15 times that of Russia. They can make a choice. They have a choice to make. Do they want to support Ukraine? And there was a summit in London. The president of Finland, I thought he said it very well. This is a European problem that Ukraine's dealing with right now. And we all need to recognize it as a European problem. And they can make the choice to increase their military budgets, to increase their support for Ukraine. They can help, but they have to make the choice to do it. And there's going to be a number of Americans who are like, great, let them do it. I'm fine with that. They should do it, but we shouldn't. Leave us out of it. And you know what? It's even better this way, because finally they stood up and did what was right, and we shouldn't have to pay for it. And this reminds me of, you'll hear a testimony, or you'll hear somebody who had a neglectful parent. Justin Bieber's dad comes to mind. I don't know why Justin Bieber's dad just came to mind, but he's not a good dude. Justin Bieber has made it. And, you know, this person who's made it through adversity, they might say, yeah, my parents were really neglectful, but that gave me grit, and that told me I had to work hard and really rely on myself alone. And the neglectful parent hears that story and says, look what I did. They really owe me. Look what I made happen. You really should thank me for that. That is just gross. It might turn out fine for Ukraine, but to the detriment of the United States and to our reputation. We do not want to be that kind of person in the world. We are better than this. This is something I said 4 years ago when Biden botched the Afghanistan withdrawal. We are better than this. We have to be better than this. I am not satisfied to just say, oh, you know, it's a different time. We're gonna go on our own. America first should not ever mean America only. It cannot mean that. That's not the world we live in, and that is not our national reputation or our national character. But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know. Let me know why. I had fun, and I hope you did too. Bye-bye.
It might be you. It's the wrong podcast.
Wrong!